Gaza, where he once carried the gates, and made him grind grain in the prison. He lost his eyes, but it wasn't blindness that defeated him. It was forgetting where his strength came from. Samson, the strongest man alive, was now blind, chained and grinding grain like an animal in a Philistine prison. The wheel turned, round and round, day after day, the same monotonous rhythm, the same humiliation. The Philistines would pass by and mock him, laugh at him, spit on him. The man who once made them tremble was now their entertainment. But something was happening in that prison that no one could see. Each rotation of the mill became a prayer. Each step in the darkness became a moment of reflection. Each chain that bound his body couldn't bind the awakening happening in his soul. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time in his life, Samson had nothing left to rely on but God. No strength to boast in, no eyes to lust with, no freedom to chase his desires. Just silence, darkness, and the slow, painful work of repentance. His hair began to grow back. The Philistines didn't notice, or maybe they didn't care. After all, they had already broken him. They had gouged out his eyes. What could hair do now? But they didn't understand what Samson was finally beginning to understand. His strength had never been about his hair. It was about his consecration, his dedication, his covenant with God. And in the grinding stone prison of Gaza, Samson was being consecrated again, not by a vow his parents made, but by a surrender he was choosing for himself. The man who once saw everything with his eyes was now seeing for the first time with his heart. Meanwhile, the Philistines were preparing a celebration, a great festival to honor their god Dagon. "Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands," they declared. They gathered by the thousands, rulers, warriors, men and women, filling the temple of Dagon. 3,000 people crowded onto the roof alone, watching and celebrating below. And in the midst of their triumph, someone had an idea. "Bring out Samson! Let him entertain us." So they brought him out of the prison, the blind judge, the broken deliverer, the man who once carried city gates now stumbling between the pillars of their temple. They laughed, they mocked, they celebrated their God's victory over the God of Israel. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was that God wasn't finished with Samson. He wasn't finished forging strength that comes only through surrender. He wasn't finished writing redemption into the story of a man who had lost everything. The Philistines thought they were watching Samson's end. They had no idea they were about to witness the beginning of his legacy, because the weakest moment of Samson's life was about to become the most powerful.
Let me tell you, when you're waiting for the bus or board, this one game is enough. Let's turn on What's in Waje. Oh, we arrived with a what in our hand. I need to tell you, when you have a what in your hand, then you will win this game. The next thing you have to do is play the cards. When all you have left is one random card and one what card. Get the what out. Choose the same suits as your other cards. Keep them at bay. Hey, you idiots! You've got nowhere to go now.
Awful. The temple of Dagon was packed, wall to wall, shoulder to shoulder. 3,000 people on the roof alone, all gathered to celebrate what they believed was the ultimate victory of their God over the God of Israel. And there, in the center of it all, stood Samson, blind, chained, a spectacle for their amusement. They made him perform, made him dance, made him stumble. The laughter echoed off the stone walls. But Samson wasn't thinking about the crowd, he was thinking about the pillars. He turned to the servant who was guiding him and said quietly, Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them." The servant, seeing no harm in it, positioned him between the two central pillars, the load-bearing columns that held the entire structure. Samson reached out. His hands found the cold stone. He felt the weight of the temple resting on these pillars, thousands of lives suspended above him. And then he prayed, not a prayer of vengeance, not a cry of bitterness, but a prayer of surrender. "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." It was the prayer of a broken man who had finally learned that strength doesn't come from what we can do, but from what God can do through us when we surrender everything. The Spirit of the Lord, silent for so long, returned. Samson braced himself. He pushed with everything he had, not the strength of his arms, but the strength of God flowing through him one final time. "Let me die with the Philistines," he whispered, and he pushed. The pillars cracked, the stone groaned, and then, in a deafening roar, the entire temple collapsed. The roof caved in, the walls crumbled, 3,000 people fell in an instant. The rulers of the Philistines, the very men who had orchestrated his downfall, were crushed under the weight of their own celebration. And Samson, the blind judge who had lost everything, died in the rubble. But here's what the Bible tells us. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. In his death, Samson accomplished what he failed to accomplish in all his years of strength, not through pride, not through power, not through conquest, but through surrender. The man who lost everything found his true strength only when he let go, when he stopped relying on himself and finally, completely, depended on God. His final act wasn't about revenge, it was about redemption. It was about a God who can take our greatest failures and turn them into his greatest victories. Samson's body was recovered by his brothers. They brought him back and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of his father Manoah. He had judged Israel for 20 years, but his legacy would last far longer than that, because in the end, it wasn't really about him. It was about the God who never gave up on him. Samson's story is paradoxical. It's a warning and a promise wrapped together. A warning about the cost of compromise, about how small choices lead to devastating consequences, about how even God-given gifts can be squandered when we place our desires above our calling. But it's also a promise that God's calling isn't cancelled by our failure, that his purpose isn't derailed by our weakness, that even in our deepest shame, redemption is still possible. Samson's blindness wasn't his end. It was the beginning of true vision. In the darkness, he finally saw what he had missed his entire life. That strength without surrender is just weakness disguised. That power without dependence is a foundation built on sand. He spent years fighting enemies, but his greatest battle was always internal, against pride, against lust, against the belief that he could carry God's calling without actually walking with God. And when he lost everything, his eyes, his freedom, his reputation, he finally found what he had been looking for all along: purpose, peace, the presence of God. Centuries later, the writer of Hebrews would list Samson among the heroes of faith, because in the end, despite every failure, he surrendered. There's a shadow of something greater in Samson's final act, a man stretching out his arms in death to defeat the enemy, giving his life to save his people. It echoes forward to another man, another sacrifice, another moment when weakness became the pathway to victory. Jesus, stretched out on a cross, arms wide, defeating sin and death through surrender.
YouVersion Bible App Plus Audio. Try it.
Surrender. Samson's life points us to a deeper truth. God's strength is perfected in our weakness. His glory shines brightest when we stop pretending we have it all together and finally admit we need Him. What if the moments you regret most are the very ones God can use to reveal His greatest strength in you? What if your darkest chapter isn't the end of your story, but the place where redemption begins? Samson teaches us that it's never too late, that God can meet us in the prison, in the chains, in the grinding stone monotony of our failures, and He can still do something beautiful. Samson's journey took him from strength to failure, from sight to blindness, from pride to surrender. But it didn't end in defeat, it ended in redemption. Maybe you're in your own Gaza right now, chained by regret, blinded by shame, grinding through the same painful rhythms, wondering if God can still use you after everything you've done. Samson's story is your reminder that He can, that your past doesn't disqualify you, that your weaknesses don't surprise Him, that the moments you thought disqualified you from His purpose might actually be the very place where His strength begins. God didn't write Samson off when he failed. He met him in the prison, restored him in the darkness, and gave him one more chance to fulfill his calling, through surrender, the very thing his pride had refused. And He'll do the same for you. If this message spoke to you, if it reminded you that redemption is still possible, share it with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's still trying to stand again, someone who thinks it's too late for them, because you never know. Your act of faith might be exactly what lifts another person's soul. Samson's legacy isn't that he was perfect, it's that he was redeemed. And that same redemption is available to anyone willing to surrender. So if you're grinding stones in the dark right now, remember, your hair is growing back, your strength is being restored, and God isn't finished with your story yet. May your weakness become the place where God's strength begins.